Hey everyone, and welcome to another Game of Thrones Tower of Babel breakdown. As always, I am Julian and Meush. I am joined by Daniel D'Souza.
Yo.
And we are here today to talk about Season 7, Episode 5, Eastwatch, which is one word, and I didn't even realize this until I was writing the show notes today. I thought it was two words, just so you know. For everyone who didn't read the book, Eastwatch is all one word. Okay? For those who are new to the show, welcome, and we are about to break down this week's episode of HBO's Game of Thrones scene by scene, then give our overall thoughts, and that's about it. We don't spoil anything from the books, and we're not going to spoil anything that we may know from next week's episode as well. Okay, so it's a spoiler-free zone, and I hope you enjoy. Now, a little bit of house cleaning before we get going, as usual. We still have our crowdfunding campaign going over at towerofbabel.ca/donate. We're still trying to make $1,000. You can check our progress by going to gofundme.com/GOT season 7, and that's the number 7 at the end. And that's where you'll see all the donations, even though GoFundMe is terrible with accepting donations, apparently. We won't be using them next year, I can promise you that.
Yeah.
But for those who have had donations bounce, I've added a PayPal link to that same website, towerofbabel.ca/donate. So if that happened to you, PayPal is super safe, first of all, and also really reliable. So there's a button there for you as well. Remember, if you donate $10, you get into our Slack group. We have some questions from the Slack group, I think. Dan, do we have questions from the Slack group?
Yeah, I threw a couple up there.
Okay, cool. And we have awesome discussions about Game of Thrones all week long. So if you want to get involved in that, you can just toss us $10. And of course, follow us on Twitter at TowerBabbleCast on Twitter, and Facebook.com/TowerBabbleCast. And that's BABBLE, by the way, not the biblical version. Okay, so Dan, I want to tell you a quick story. All right.
Okay.
I was watching Game of Thrones in a public setting again. Right? Did I tell the story on the first time I went to go watch the show?
Yeah, you said you were watching at a bar or something.
Yeah, so I did that again. I went back to that same bar this time, except I watched it outside this time, which I think was the better experience. It wasn't on a projector, so I got richer blacks and all that kind of stuff. It was a little bit more ambient noise, but they had really loud. The sound was really loud, so that's great. So because when they say the word "cunt," all the kids in the neighborhood can hear it. What? It's true. They said it. It was like the first scene.
I guess.
Listen, right. Sort of the C word. It was on the show. If you watch the show, you heard it. I'm not trying to. I'm not calling anyone that. It's fine. Yeah. But anyway, so I was down there watching the show, drinking some wine, because I always drink red wine when I'm watching Game of Thrones. It just feels more appropriate, you know.
Makes sense. They have their own brand of wine too, by the way.
I know. I would like to try it. I just have the feeling it's probably not very good. Don't you get that impression? That TV show branded wine probably isn't that great.
Safe to assume that, yeah. But
anyway, so I was watching the show and I was thinking, there's all these people down here watching it with me, right? I just wish there was some way that I could show that I was like more of a hardcore fan than just the average Game of Thrones fan. You ever had that feeling? You're just like, oh, I wish people knew that I was like way more into it than they were.
So it's not a problem for me, but
that's fair. So
I kind of exude that.
it's like
people
coming
look
out
at me,
of your
they
pores.
can tell. Yeah.
So, Dan, by the way, we should mention you're not feeling super well, so if your voice is a little raspy or whatever.
Does it sound? Can you tell already? Yeah, I've been feeling
totally
sick
tell.
a little bit.
Yeah, it's fine. So, anyway, send your get well wishes to Dan. He could use them, I guess. Anyway, so I'm like, oh man, I wish I had a better way of showing off how much of a Game of Thrones fan I was. Dan, is there possibly like maybe a shirt I could wear?
I see what you did there. I didn't know where you were going with that story.
Is there maybe like a shirt or something I could wear that would like help?
As it happens, Julian, you're in luck. In the Read Pop GRRM boxes, there's
I think it's
very cool.
I think a GRRM, by the way, George R.R. Martin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same thing. Yeah. Very cool t-shirt. I was wearing it all this past weekend. It's like, it's a map of Westeros. And then in like gold, there's the sigils of the great houses of Westeros in their respective areas. So, the direwolf in the north, the lion in the west, the falcon and moon in the Vale of Arryn. Really cool shirt. And it's like a nice little touch of detail that they added to it is they have the Targaryen dragon sort of like creeping in, but it's very subtle. Like it's not one of the sigils. It's just like it's coming into Westeros from the east.
That's cool.
No, so I love this shirt.
So we got an awesome shirt. It fits well, by the way.
It's a good fit, yeah.
Okay, good. That's important. I always find
I got a few compliments.
Kind of stuff yeah. Good. Just a few?
Quite a few.
Anyway, yeah, our sponsor this year is readpop.com. And they have generously given us a bunch of their George R. R. Martin merchandise boxes, Game of Thrones merch. And we're going to go over what's in them all the rest of the season. There's only 2 episodes left, which is crazy to me. But we're going to go over more of the stuff that's in them. Maybe we'll mention one of the things before we go today. If you want a chance to win one of these boxes, all right, and get one of those shirts that Dan got complimented on, you can head over to iTunes. Leave us a review on our iTunes podcast. Whatever it is, just take a screen grab of that review, send it to our email address, towerofbabelpodcast@gmail.com, and you're entered to win one of these George R. R. Martin themed merch boxes. Okay, Game of Thrones stuff. It's awesome. It's Dan's literally been he's been annoying me with telling me how awesome all this stuff is, and I don't even have access to it right now. It's driving me nuts.
It's pretty exciting.
But if you want to just skip that whole process and buy one yourself, we can help you with that as well. Head over to their website, readpop.com. They go to their store, find one of their George R. R. Martin Game of Thrones boxes, and then on the checkout, use the promo code BABBLEBOX, BABBLEBOX, all one word, and you get 10% off. Okay, so let's get on with the show. We have lots to talk about. This is one crazy. It felt crazy long to me. It was 59 minutes, but it felt crazy long. There's a lot going on. All right, so we're just going to quickly go through some listener questions and comments, then get right into the episode. So Dan, why don't you take us through the first one?
The first one that I put up there, I saw something. You had a longer conversation with the person. You do all the Twitter stuff. But Amy Lynn Thompson on Twitter made a really interesting observation. It's cool to see Jon and Gendry together, and that's sort of like the young Ned and the young Robert during Robert's Rebellion. I just like how she tied that together.
We never got to see them, really, the two of them together, especially young. I mean, people have speculated that some of the Game of Thrones spin-offs might be of Robert's Rebellion. They have denied those rumors. We're unlikely to see that. When we get these spin-offs, it's going to be new characters. So it is kind of a nice touch. I think she says like she just likes when things come full circle, and I think we can all agree that that's the case.
That's cool. They're both bastards, although we found out this episode that Jon's probably not a bastard, but it's not really the point. As far as they know, they're each.
We'll get that. We'll get there. Now on Twitter again, John Bennett, friend of the show, longtime listener. He basically asked me what I had asked everyone else last night, which is which person from Jon's crew is most likely to be killed next episode. There's no way they all survive. And he says he's leaning towards Beric, but I think he's hedging his bet in the fact that he thinks that Beric is going to die and then just be brought back to life. So when I wrote my original tweet last night, I basically said, hey, who does everyone have as far as they think is going to die? And then I hashtagged it Death Pool. So I'm leaning towards Tormund, probably the one gonna bite the dust in this one. I could be wrong. I'm having a hard time seeing these certain characters that came back that have been ignored for so long, right? Being killed off like the next episode after they're brought back. I'm looking at you, Gendry, right? So that's kind of where I'm leaning.
Dan, I think it's probably going to be more than one, realistically speaking. I don't know. I remember saying after having watched the episode, I was watching with my family, I'm like, okay, so Jon and the Hound for sure survive. The rest are up in the air. And Jorah probably survives too.
I think Jon, Gendry, Jorah, and the Hound are all locks to walk away.
Yeah. I mean, we don't really need Thoros of Myr anymore. Like, he only is there to bring Dondarrion back.
Mm-hmm. So if they both die, then then it's all fine.
I don't know. I'm also thinking that Beric Dondarrion is going to make like a final sacrifice his life either to bring someone else back or just to save the rest of the crew.
Okay. I mean, I feel like there's a lot to speculate on with these guys, and we'll get there by the end of this episode. So Dan, what's next? We have an email here.
This is one of the emails. We had a bunch of emails. We don't have time to talk about them all, but this was pretty cool. Brad Galloway writes in talking about dragonglass being the secret to Valyrian steel, and he got pretty technical. I don't know much about metallurgy, but I guess
neither does he. Apparently, he's like, I don't know much about metallurgy.
Well, he knows a hell of a lot more than I do. But basically, part of the email was asking people if any of our fans know more about metallurgy, if that's something that's possible. I guess silica can be combined with steel in like our real world. So it's not that far-fetched that dragonglass could have been part of the Valyrian steel process.
You know what? So here's the thing. No idea. Again, I mean, that's clearly not a metallurgist, right? But I like the idea of like thinking about real-world science and how, what dragonglass is. What didn't you say? It's obsidian.
Obsidian,
right?
Yeah.
Which is made from like sand, right? It's like it is more like glass than it is like a rock.
Yeah, well, it's both. I don't know. Like I said, I feel like obsidian is pretty brittle, like in our world. So I don't know if it would be great as a sword, but if it's like crushed up and melted in somehow, obviously don't know anything about sword making. I don't know. It kind of makes sense, especially because dragonglass.
If only Gendry was around and we could ask him.
It seems like dragonglass keeps coming up more and more this season, so it makes sense for it to be part of that.
Yeah, I just kind of took it at face value, and that dragonglass is just important in the sense that we know already how it's important, that it helps kill White Walkers, and that I don't know if it is any deeper than that necessarily, and if it is, I don't know if the show has time to explore that, and that may be something the books might explore later. But I just kind of take it at face value that they'll make arrow tips and that kind of stuff out of, and like daggers and that kind of stuff out of it. Instead of trying to like merge it and create more Valyrian, because I imagine because if that was the case, I mean, I feel like there would be more Valyrian steel stuff there is already people who know how to work with Valyrian steel in Westeros, right?
Not many.
We know not many, but people who do, right? And so I feel like that would be kind of like an open secret if that was the case, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
I know it's supposed to be a closely kept secret by the people who do know, so whatever. I always kind of thought that it wouldn't make a good weapon, so everyone would have to have two swords, sort of like in The Witcher. You have like your magic sword and your regular sword, but this Valyrian steel gets both done at once, right?
Well, it depends on who you're fighting, right? Like you were exactly like you said, two swords, because you'd use a regular sword against living people, and then the other one against because the ones
dragonglass had that's why the Children of the Forest lost the war, is because they didn't have the right kind of weapons. The first men had weapons of bronze and just powered through.
Okay. So we have a question here from Kim Spratley. Yep, Spratley. I'm going to go with Spratley. Kim Spratley, who messaged us on Slack. And again, $10, get it on the Slack group. And why doesn't Jon take Ghost with him north of the Wall?
Right?
Fair question.
Fair question,
Kim. Here's the thing. I don't want to get into this now because I have a little rant that I'm going to go through right when we get to the point where he leaves Dragonstone and goes to the Eastwatch. There's a couple rants I'm going to have this episode about things that I'm pretty annoyed by. This episode overall just left me annoyed is the best word I can put for it. So I don't want to get into that here. I will get into it though later down the line. And then Dan, we have a question from Lane, Lane Scherer, also from the Slack group, who asked what?
Well, she asked a lot of things actually. I just cut it up because it was too long. But her main question here is about Theon and why we don't get to see any fallout from his return after losing the fleet and losing his sister. You'd think he'd have some questions for Daenerys, or we want to just check in with that character, right? But it kind of got me thinking because we also haven't heard anything from Grey Worm or Missandei, and that seems like a big storyline to just drop all of a sudden,
Well, we didn't hear anything from Missandei this week.
Yeah.
I get the impression that they're just kind of they'll deal with it when they become important again. I guess at this point they aren't, so they have more important things to deal with. But you're right, it's weird that they just leave it and open ended like that. The show's been doing that a lot with certain things this season, and it gets a little frustrating. But there's no good answer. Well, I don't think he's dead.
We don't. Daenerys doesn't know what happened at Castle Rock, right? Oh no, she has. She
does know. Yeah, she does know. She does. But I guess if she's in contact with Grey Worm somehow, right? They're exchanging ravens,
I guess.
So
they're using whatever messaging system Tyrion and Bran are using.
Yeah, that's right.
God, that was bad.
Don't dwell on that kind of stuff too much. There's bigger fish to fry in this episode.
All right.
But yeah, I guess they're safe-ish. Presumably, they were pretty close together, like last week after the whole, even this week after the whole ambush thing. They're not that far away from where the Unsullied would be, right? So
I don't know.
It's a good question, and I have no idea. And I don't even know if we're going to hear from them next week. Unlikely.
We'll see what happens.
Maybe Grey Worm has some sort of has some plan that it's going to be a surprise, something similar to what we saw last week with another ambush of some kind, but I don't know what that would be yet.
It's hard to say. But the Unsullied don't run away either, so I don't see them retreating back to Dragonstone somehow. They're just going to stay and fight.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's get right into the episode as a whole. Now, there were over 20 distinct major scenes, at least 20. That's the number that I counted in my rewatch. I might have missed one. And that's a lot. So we have a lot to discuss. So let's get right into it. This is Season 7, Episode 5, Eastwatch. Again, directed by Matt Shakman, who directed last week. And I mentioned as well last week that he directed a lot of Always Sunny in Philadelphia. And I don't know if we mentioned it last week, but there's certain scenes, especially this week and definitely last week, that comedy background definitely comes to the fore. Specifically with the ones with the guards, both this week and last week. So just keep that in mind, because clearly he has that comedic touch, and they're using it. And I think it might be one of the last times we see that this season. Now that what's Matt Chapman has done.
Yeah.
Now this is written by Dave Hill, who also directed Home and Sons of the Harpy. He's been involved with the show for a long, long time, and story production, story editing, almost from the start, basically. He's also going to be writing the season 8 premiere. I think back to Sons of the Harpy, and I could be wrong on how I thought about this, but I remember that episode being a little clunky as well. And I find that this episode's a bit clunky in some parts, so it might be a writing issue, because obviously Matt Shakman did a pretty good job directing last week in one of our favorite episodes, certainly of this season, maybe of the entire series.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to go back and rewatch to confirm that, but it's just because it jumps around so much that it's going to feel disorienting a little bit, because there's, like you said, 20 distinct scenes. They're all over the place, right? It doesn't have that flow. And it's kind of what Game of Thrones used to feel like. It used to jump around a lot, and we were used to it doing less of that lately, I think.
Well, yeah, it felt more like old Game of Thrones in that sense, but even those were paced better. I think there's a pacing issue here. And again, we'll get into that at the very end when we go through our overall thoughts. But let's start in the Reach. And Bronn pulls Jaime out of the water, downriver. I guess he's saved his life again, and he points that out. Now, we've preached this season that it's important to ignore travel times and similar issues like the one Daniel brought up earlier with the communication with Bronn. But in this case, I'm a little annoyed. It just doesn't really make any sense that they would be able to escape from that situation that they were in last week, right? I'm not crazy.
I think it's weird that this is the one that bothers you the most. Maybe it's a fast-moving river, whatever. They get washed downstream. I'm willing to accept that.
Okay, all right. I said that we have preached even that it's important to ignore that stuff if you want to enjoy the series right now. And so for whatever I think the reason this bothers me so much is because the idea of having Jaime captured is a much more compelling story conceit than seeing him crawl back to Cersei again, which we do see this week, right?
Yeah.
It seems like it's always one step forward, two steps back with Jaime and his character progression, especially the last couple seasons. And with only 2 episodes left this season, I'm ready to see some more growth. And this episode specifically does the opposite of that. And that's what's most frustrating to me.
Yeah, I was definitely all geared up for him to be a prisoner, and like the last time he was held prisoner and had lost the use of his hand, he learned a lot of humility, and that's when his character grew the most. You could say when he's away from Cersei, that's when he grows, and when he's with her, he's stagnant.
And what's the next best Jaime scene this, or probably the best Jaime scene this episode is the one with Tyrion, right? That we could have had a lot of that, if he was captured. It's just really frustrating that they chose to go this route.
I mean, it is what it is. They have a plan. They know what they're doing. Like,
yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that people sometimes think when I'm criticizing the show that I think that I could do a better job. Like that's how certain people look at when people criticize the show. That's not what I'm saying. Yeah. But what I can say is the choice that they made in this case felt like an error in my mind. But that's just my opinion, right? The showrunners aren't infallible. I can be proven wrong that this was the right choice, and it'll all pay off in the end. But as of right now, if I'm looking for the most satisfying storytelling, that wasn't it.
Yeah.
Obviously, guys, I know people don't like us when we're being negative, but this episode, I'm not a fan of this episode. So if it sounds like I'm ragging on the show a lot this week, it's just this week because this episode was a bit rough for me, and that's just my opinion.
It's okay. We got some nice emails in telling us that it's okay to be negative, and some people actually like it too. So I'm not going to worry about it as much.
Okay. All right. Speaking of which, so we got some really nice reviews in. We called for reviews last week for the contest, and you guys can feel free to write whatever review you like. It's going to be a random draw.
I guess that's the thing. It could be a 1-star review that wins. Like, I hope it's not, but technically you're entered.
That being, I mean, it'd be weird if you only left the show a 1-star review. Like, why are you listening? I guess that's the question. But hate listening, I guess. But some really nice things were said, and I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who did leave us a review. They were really, really kind. We went through a little phase there, I guess, a couple of years back where we got a bunch of really negative reviews for some reason. I honestly feel like we've improved a lot since we started this whole thing. And I think that some of the reviews in the last week reflect that, and I really appreciate that. So, yeah. Anyway, where was I?
Yeah, we were talking about the show, actually.
Right, yeah. Now, as for the scene itself, I mean, we kind of speculated that the reason Bran had made that daring move last week, and Dan, you kind of criticized it as being out of character for Bran. We kind of thought that at the time maybe he was doing it just so he could keep Jaime alive, so he could still get paid. It turns out that is exactly the reason in which he articulates that this week. Do you buy that? Does that make sense for you?
I guess because Jaime's kind of his only link to the Lannisters and that promise. Like, Cersei wouldn't really care.
Oh, absolutely not.
To hold that up, right? So it does make sense. I don't look at Bronn as the hero, the saving lives sort of style, But it's fine. It does make sense character wise because that's what he's driven by.
Mm-hmm. Especially after he lost his gold last week, right?
His little baggie, yeah.
Satchel. I don't know.
His little hacky sack gold.
So I do really like Jaime's reaction to having had his army completely devastated. He's in shock here. Like he's like mouth is agape, right? After having seen what just happened. It's nice when it dawns on him that that was only one dragon. Like, she still has 2 more of those things. And then basically tells Bronn, we're fucked, right? Which he has a nice criticize, it's like, no, you mean you're fucked, right? Nice little rebuttal.
I do love how every character, the realization, what a dragon is, the awe that these characters, because think about it, it's such an otherworldly thing. So I think Nikolai Coster-Waldau did a great job there.
Absolutely. So in the behind-the-scenes video that the HBO made for the Battle of the Loot Train, which I guess is now its official name, they mentioned that they loved the idea of what Drogon did in that battle because it's such a fun fantasy concept. It's what if someone brought an F-16 to a medieval battle, right? And that's kind of the idea there, that it's so overpowered that it's to the people in the show, it's just insane. You can't even wrap your mind around it, kind of thing. And you, like you said, Nikolai Coster-Waldau clearly is able to emote that, where I don't think everyone is able to very well. There's certain actors on the show who've done better jobs interacting with the dragons than others. John, I think, does a pretty good job this week. Danny has had a lot of experience with it, even though I still think she's not that great for some reason. And then obviously Jaime, I basically like Jaime most of the time. Nikolai Coster-Waldau is a pretty good actor. You wouldn't think that if you ever watched Gods of Egypt, but yeah, I mean, there's some pretty good acting performances in this week, specifically with Lena Headey coming up that we'll talk about. Anything else you want to talk about in this scene?
No, it kind of leads into the next scene pretty nicely.
Mm-hmm. So we kind of move down the river a bit, and we start by seeing Tyrion walk through the charred wreckage of last week's battle. He's clearly somewhat shook by it all, right? He's seeing this devastation. His family crest is...
These are his countrymen. Like, he is still conflicted about seeing... Like, even last week, he was conflicted watching the battle, right? Watching ostensibly his people be slaughtered.
He then joins Dany as she's making a speech to the remaining Lannister men. She tells him that she's not Cersei, and she's not what the rumors would have them believe. But then she proceeds to tell them to bend the knee or die. The old Sophie's choice of death. Drogon is looming imposingly behind her. Some of the men start to kneel, but then we see that Lord Randall Tarly is among them and refuses to kneel. So this is interesting because we thought that Lord Tarly was elsewhere during this battle. He wasn't in last week's battle, but apparently was.
Oh, he was. There was a brief scene where he told the men to get spears, I think, or maybe called for archers, something like that.
Okay, yeah,
it was a very quick cut.
Yeah. You think they did that? They think they put that in there specifically because they're like, oh shit.
Yeah, you got to remember that this guy's here.
Yeah. So he's there, and he's scowling a bit. And Lord Tarly basically tells Dany that regardless of what Cersei has done or who she is, at least she was born in Westeros, right? And Dany then points out that, hey, you know what? You want to trade your pride for your life. I respect that, but I'm still going to execute you, right?
Yeah. It's so weird that his character, like, who just turned his cloak, like, he just betrayed the people he was sworn to, is now staunchly supporting Cersei and refuses.
Tyrion calls him out on that, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that? But then that's when he gives the answer, like, hey, listen, it's one thing to, back the house that I've been backing my entire life. It's another to back this, invader. Although it's weird that they call her that. I still think it's weird because it's like, yeah, I mean, technically she came from Essos, but like, she was born on Dragonstone, and like her dad was like, was the king. Like, it's not that
her dad
strange,
was the Mad King.
But whatever works, I guess. And so Tyrion tries to intervene. He advocates sending him to the wall, instead of killing him. Randall Tarly basically says that she doesn't have the authority for that, and basically says, "Look, I choose death. Like, you can't send me to the wall. Whatever you want to do, if you're going to do something, just kill me." Right? Then
true soldier.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, right. I mean, it's funny you say that because the Jaime Jaime's also known as that true soldier as well, but has a completely different response to this whole thing, right? Later on with that conversation with Cersei. Anyway, so Dickon kind of like sticks his hand up and said, like, listen, I'm with my dad. Randall tells him to, don't be dumb. Tyrion also tries to tell him not to be dumb. Like, listen, we already lost one house, in this whole debacle. Let's not lose another, right? But nope, he's just going to be as stubborn as his dad, and it sucks because we literally said there's no way Dickon is going to last very long. It's just funny that it was literally the next episode, like almost the first scene that he's killed off.
It is kind of weird for them to introduce the character and, establish him and just to kill him off. Like, he was basically there just for a couple cheap jokes about his name, right?
Yeah, and then you got a little bit of character,
he saved Jaime's life, I guess.
Yeah, and then you're dead. And you'll probably never be mentioned again. Maybe by Sam, I don't know. So they move them over to this spot. Tyrion keeps trying to like reason with Dany, and she says, I'm not going to cut their heads off, right? Instead, implying that she's going to burn them to death, which is, here's the thing, right? It plays right into the stereotype that Cersei has painted of her by doing that.
It's exactly what she was just trying to convince them that she isn't. You know,
right? Like,
if you're trying to distance yourself from the Mad King, this is not the way to do it.
And that's what's frustrating about this whole thing. So she burns them alive. It's a pretty cool scene. A very subtle Dracarys. It's kind of cool. But I'm kind of conflicted about this whole thing. You know, on one hand, I agree that burning people alive, you know, plays right into that stereotype, and it does make her look like the Mad King. But on the other hand, this is war, right? And at some point, she does need to establish a position of strength, and she mentions that later on in this episode. She has to set an example at some point. She can't just keep forgiving people. No one will take her seriously, right?
Yeah, and it does win her the rest of the Southern Army too, whoever's alive there.
Yeah, that like 25 guys or whatever.
I think it's meant to imply that there are more, but
sure. I mean, but most of them are probably killed by either Drogon or just in the battle. I don't think there's many left, or probably a lot of them fled and got away. Because like there's no way they got the entire thing. Because even Cersei asked like, how many people did we lose? You know, later on, obviously they didn't get. Some got away.
Yeah.
Right.
Maybe someone in the river like Jaime.
Right. They just didn't end up in the same place. So where do you come down on this? Like, if you were her, what would you have done?
Oh, I don't know how to answer that question. I think it's disappointing to see Dany do this. You know that Jon would not approve of this, and they've been kind of playing up their chemistry, trying to bring them closer together. Especially like Dany. I guess this season she's become more of the conqueror, and you know, but for the most part she has been sort of more soft-hearted and forgiving, and it's just weird to see her make this change now. You know,
it's not. The thing is, it's not that weird to me because again, she makes it clear that you know she has to be in a position of strength, which she hasn't been up until now. Right? She's losing,
and I guess this has worked for her before. You know, she burnt that one ship in Marine, and then everybody bent the knee, sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, she burnt that guy, the slaver. You know, when she freed. Yeah, she freed the slaves, right? So yeah, so there's that whole thing. So it has worked for her in the past.
Yeah, she has a type. Yeah, she's got a strategy.
You know, and Lord Tarley kind of puts her in a difficult position too, because at this critical juncture, can she really risk appearing soft? You know, especially in front of the Lannister men. Like,
no, but what you could do is like he's a highborn prisoner. You know, his life is worth something, even in trading, right?
Yeah.
So he would be a valuable hostage were she to take him and his son back to Dragonstone.
But no, that's not what she decides to do. There's more discussion on this exact topic later, and we'll get to that. So we go back to Dragonstone, and Dany returns home to what is a super windy day. So there was a whole bunch of scenes here. You know, like Jon and Dany have a conversation, then Jorah comes back, all that kind of stuff. But it's so windy that I can't imagine that you were able to use any of the dialogue that was recorded on set that day. And it was like almost distracting how much people's clothes are blowing around. Did you notice this, or is it just me?
I mean, I did. It didn't really bother me. I get it. I guess I noticed it, but it's an island in the middle of the sea. Like, it's gonna be windy. I don't.
Yeah. I thought it was crazy. Like, it is crazy windy. Like was this a stylistic choice, or was it just like this is the last day of filming, they have to get it done, kind of thing? I don't know. Anyway, so Dany returns home, and she swoops in over Jon, and Drogon lands, and then kind of like charges over to Jon. Was this an intentional move by Dany? The question here, like, was this like a power move, or what was she kind of doing?
I have no idea. Her face didn't really seem like she was more surprised than anything that Jon was able to reach out and touch him, right?
Yeah, I got that impression as well.
So I'm not sure. It almost seemed like it was Drogon's decision, and she just was along for the ride.
Yeah. Okay. I could kind of take that. I could agree with that.
I don't know. It's cool. Like, obviously, it's basically confirmed, or it is confirmed that Jon's Targaryen, right? He's gonna have an affinity with the dragons. I kept picturing essentially that same scene, but with Rhaegal, because I assume Jon's gonna ride Rhaegal. And I was like, it happened, and I was like, yes, this is it. I was vocal, but then it was just Drogon, and it's not gonna happen.
Well, I mean, it could still happen just with it. No, not yet. Yeah, and you're right. Like, so the Drogon lands, and Jon takes off his glove, like touches his face. The dragon effects are really great. And they have this like nice moment, like kind of like a connection. They established a connection there. And Dany kind of seems a little surprised by this whole thing. It's kind of, the way it's kind of shot is weird. It looks like she's like can't see around like one of Drogon's spikes, and she's like trying to like I can't see what's happening.
Is he eating him? Is he talking to him?
Yeah, exactly. But Dany gets off. Drogon flies away, and then they have a brief conversation. And Dany asks Jon about that whole knife in the heart thing that Davos brought up a couple episodes back. Jon gets a bit cagey, you know. He's like, "Oh yeah, Davos. He likes to exaggerate." Dany looks super skeptical here, and I guess here's the thing: I understand why she's interested in this. My question is, if she knew the answer to it, like let's say he revealed that answer, how does that play into everything? You know, what does that mean for her interpretation of Jon or what she thinks of him? I mean, what do you think?
It doesn't really change much because she's just learned about this guy. Like, she's just met him for the first time. He's been surprising her consistently, I think, right? Like I said earlier, they're playing up their chemistry. They're getting closer together, whatever. The only thing is that is blood magic, right? And she doesn't like that. That's that one. Like, Jon isn't aware of this, obviously. He's just being secretive, but Daenerys doesn't trust magic of any sort, really. Which is weird for someone who rides dragons.
Yeah. We talked about this last week. It's a weird dynamic. It's strange that they're holding this, like this is like the kind of that one thing between them. You know, it might be that if we're using tropes, let's say like a romantic comedy trope, right? Everything's going great. That's how it usually, if they meet each other, things are going great, and then one person finds out something about the other one that they didn't reveal earlier on, and then they quote unquote break up, and then there's some kind of like large romantic gesture, and then they live happily ever after, right? That's a very common.
Yeah. Jon has to throw open the doors at her wedding and proclaim his love.
That's right. That's right. So speak now or forever hold your peace.
Right?
Wait. So do you think it's at, just to make things even worse, do you think it's at Jorah and Dany's wedding?
No.
Right? This guy, he's been friend zoned for so long. Yeah. Everything's going right. And right at that last moment, she's like, no, this isn't going to work. That's pretty funny. But basically what I'm trying to say is that it seems like they're setting that, I guess, lack. I was going to bring this up later as well, but another tool that screenwriters use, they'll use it in comedies as well, but mostly in dramas, is to create drama, you need to withhold information from certain characters. And sometimes it can feel forced. When it's done well, it works really well, but other times it can feel really contrived. It's like, hey, you know this, but that person don't know that, so there's some kind of misunderstanding or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. In this case, it seems like they're kind of setting that up with, she doesn't know that, it's going to come out later, it's going to create that rift for a little while before they come back together. What do you think of that? Do you think I'm off there? No,
that's definitely what they're... I assume that's their intention, I guess. It's just, like, I kind of agree with you. I don't find it that compelling. I don't think it's that... It's weird to say this, but I don't think his resurrection is that big a deal.
It's not, especially the way that the show did it. It's
because the stakes are so high in other areas. They're talking about an army of the dead. You know, like, who cares if this guy was brought back to life? He's alive, they're dead. You know where your enemies are. Simple as that, right?
At the same time, it kind of undercuts your ability to say, like, listen, this whole thing of undead, army of undead is coming back, but, like, aren't you undead? Like, does that kind of, like, undercuts that whole argument? Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, maybe, but I'm a different kind of undead. Anyway, Jorah comes in, and talk about clunky. The way he comes back is just so... clunky is the best word I have for it, right? And they're introduced, they kind of hug, whatever. Jorah gives Jon the stink eye, which is kind of funny. Yeah. Guy can't catch a break, right? You know, you just assume he's so annoyed, like, oh, she's already got a new guy. Like, come on,
It's never gonna happen, Joe.
That's right. It's all right. I mean, even if he's just so old, like it does. It's even if I wanted it to happen, it's still gross, right?
I mean, it's all gross. The incest thing is just as gross, but
that's true. Good point. Touche. A couple takeaways from the scene. He brought this up. Obviously, whatever connection that dragons have to Targaryens is heavily being hinted at here with Jon and Drogon. There's no subtlety there whatsoever. I'm fine with that though, because we need to move on. Let's accelerate this a bit. There's certain plot points that I want accelerated. There's others that I want slowed down. This is one that I want picked up a bit, right? Let's just get to the point where people know, or at least he knows, the truth, right?
But we'll get to the point that he can ride a dragon. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the fact that Jorah returned, like his whole reunion just feels like, it's like, where can we put him in here? Like, how can we slot him in? It just doesn't feel.
I mean, it had to happen. I think what you mean by clunky is like, it is kind of convenient for him to arrive like 2 minutes after she arrives, but that's not that big a deal. Like,
I mean, it's possible that he was waiting for her to get back, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so we're gonna jump over to the north. There's a little quick, interlude here. Bran is doing some warging. He's checking out what's up with the army of the dead. We get a cool establishing shot of Eastwatch, which looks pretty impressive. By the way, we saw Eastwatch for the first time in the opening credits. That's also pretty cool. And yeah, like Eastwatch is a very like cool looking castle. They don't have the elevator that Castle Black has, but they have like this staircase kind of system thing that looks just as cool. So that's awesome. And so he flies over the wall. He's got all these ravens, and I like the way that they're using it. Like he's going in and out of all these different birds, right? I think that's kind of cool.
This is part of what the three-eyed raven told him, that he would never walk again, but he would fly.
Oh, yeah, good point. And he flies over. You see that it's this massive army, right? Sees the Night King. He looks up at him, like boom, and then all the birds go flying. Cool scene. We cut back to Bran. He tells the Maester that they need to send ravens, right? We see the fallout of those ravens, in the next few scenes in this episode.
It was just the raven scene. That's all that's Bran's only line in this episode was, "Ravens, we need to send ravens." Done.
That's fine. It's not a big deal. I didn't even consider that, but yes, you're right. So let's move over to the Citadel, and the warning from Bran has reached them, but the Grand Maesters are a bit skeptical. Understandably so, but especially mutton chops. This guy is not having any of it.
Those are some pretty sweet mutton chops.
They're really good. Sam tries to convince them. He basically tells them that the threat is real. Listen, I saw it, he says. And if only you guys would believe me, you could convince everybody else. They will trust you. If you believe me, they will trust you if you put the word out.
Yeah.
Right?
It's really important to note how much influence the Maesters have in Westeros. The major lords, of course, know how to read and whatever. But the Maesters are privy to all the information. But there are plenty of other lords that probably don't know how to read. The Maesters are doing it all for them, so they are in control of the decision making ostensibly too, right? There's a whole bunch of theories about that we don't need to get into right now, but it's just something that people don't really think about because they're kind of like an underfoot sort of character, but they're immensely important.
Well, yeah, because like John said, like Sam says here, they will trust you. Just please do something, right? Now it's interesting here that the Maesters basically speculate that this letter from Bran is just a ploy by Dany to get the Westerosi armies out of the way for her to conquer, right? And I never even considered that they would consider it that way, but that is makes a lot of sense. Yeah. It really does. It's like, you know what? That's if I was one of the people sitting at the table, I probably would that's probably what I would think. It's seemingly much more plausible than what you're reading, right?
Yeah, they got to workshop a better way to introduce people to an army of the dead, to get them to believe it. Well, I mean, there is really no way you can, but
well, we'll get to that, Dan. Someone has an idea about that. I don't think it's a good idea, but we'll get to that. Anyway, so Sam isn't happy. I mean, at least the one that we know, the Grand Maester. Do we know what's his name? Do we know it? We know it, right?
Maester Marwyn.
So Marwyn is like, listen, maybe there's something to this. He's the one that's been like, he's had Sam's back. It's kind of nice, but he's also understandably, like we said, skeptical. He's like, we'll write back for clarification, you know.
I don't even know that he's skeptical because he's already said that he believes Sam, but he has to kind of save face in front of the other Maesters. He can't look like a maniac, right?
Yeah. So Sam gets really frustrated, right? And he's out studying with. We'll back up. Let me back up a second here, because right when Sam leaves that room, Mutton Chops asked Marwyn, is like, isn't he the guy whose parents just got, or siblings just got burnt alive? And then Marwyn's like, yeah, I haven't had the heart to tell him yet. He doesn't find out this episode.
No, he doesn't.
It's another it's another move here to withhold information from people, in what is a little like in a contrived kind of way.
But
right?
It kind of makes sense because Sam isn't receiving his own ravens, right?
That's true.
So this is an example of how that Maester controls information, and he's just choosing not to share it with Sam. So,
is he choosing? I think he would have if Sam doesn't leave, right? I'm
sure
if
Sam stuck around, he would have found it.
Yeah. So Sam and Gilly are studying back at their house or wherever they live. We never really clear that up, right?
It's kind of like a dorm, I guess.
Okay, sure. And Gilly is showing off her new literacy, right? And I got like strangely excited at seeing that she was able to read for the first time. I mean, not for the first time. She's read in the past, but like at like a 3 grade level. But she's like reading like full, like big texts, which is pretty cool. I was like, yeah, that's kind of nice.
Right? It's just cute how excited she is to read what is otherwise a really boring book, right?
Yeah,
she's just excited to be able to flex her muscles there.
So Sam gets really annoyed. There's it's another really funny scene where she's like, what's an annulment? and here's the thing though. I kind of like this scene, but there's this huge truth bomb that is dropped and goes unnoticed by Sam. And there apparently a High Septon once issued an annulment for Prince Rhaegar Targaryen and married him to somebody else in secret in Dorne. Now, it's not all spelled out for you, but we can put the pieces together here that it means that Jon isn't necessarily a bastard, right? He isn't one. He's a true-born Targaryen, right?
Yeah. Rhaegar would have... This is implying that Rhaegar married Lyanna right before Jon was born.
That's right. Wait, so how's it work? If you conceived before you're married?
No. If you're... That's fine. You have to be married when the baby's born. That's why there's a shotgun weddings, right?
Okay. All right. Interesting. Okay. So that's a huge deal, right? Like it's a massive gigantic deal. And it's like a throwaway line in this scene. I don't know if it's supposed to just be like, hey, like a nod to more of the book readers or something, or to like more of the deeper fans, the ones who are really paying attention. But why go about it this way? Like, why do you think they did it in this fashion? I actually
really like this. It has that nice subtlety to it, but there's also no reason for Sam to think that's a big deal. Nobody knows that the baby was born to Rhaegar. Everybody assumes that, nobody even knows that Jon was born there, right? Nobody even knows that Lyanna had a baby.
I'm fine that Sam isn't like shocked by this news. I'm just more confused that they would use this scene to reveal that information at all, So
yeah. I think it's one of those things, like it's going to be considered like a subtle hint going forward, and it'll become larger news later on. It's probably more like, obviously those of us who've read the books or those of us who are really into it will understand the significance right away, but I don't know if the average viewer does.
I agree. I think that's probably what's going on here. It's like, hey, if you've been paying attention, that's important. But if not, it'll come back in later, and they'll be more straightforward with it next time.
Yeah. And just the other important thing about this is this means, I mean, technically, it's hard to, describe this, but Jon would be the rightful heir to the throne. His claim would supersede Daenerys's. It's,
so with the introduction of Gendry, this episode, there are actually 3 people on the same side with legitimate claims to the Iron Throne, right? Gendry, who has a claim to it, if you consider Robert's Rebellion like
see, that's the thing. It's like what is legitimate, you know?
Well, I mean, it's more legitimate than just Joe Blow, dude, or even Cersei for that matter, right?
Yeah.
And so then Jon, who would again have the greater, he's clearly not interested in that. Like that, even if he knew he had that right, I don't think he would be the type to take it, right?
And I don't the average person in Westeros would even believe that. Like, there's a lot of information that needs to be introduced before that's the case.
Like, first of all, it needs to be introduced, right? Jon needs to find out, and then he needs to find a way to convince people. And we already know he's not very good at convincing people stuff.
Not his strong suit,
right? Anyway, Sam, who I assumed was going to be expelled way before he quit, decides to go with the "you can't fire me, I quit" approach, which I respect, right? Mm-hmm. He goes and steals a bunch of scrolls and takes off with Gilly, saying that he's tired of reading about better men's accomplishments or achievements or whatever he says. It's a really powerful moment for Sam, I wonder if that fire in his belly is gonna carry forward, in a more meaningful way going forward. It's clear that he's not going to be some warrior or whatever. He's going to be important. He already is important, right? But that drive to be important, if that's going to play into it, because you've seen so many times where he's tried to be brave or whatever, but then he wasn't able to do it, in the same way that someone like Jon is able to.
I do. I mean, this is a good progression for his character, though. You're right, it won't be your standard heroics, but he took all those books and scrolls, so something's going to come out of that. My question is, where do you think he's going? I guess they know that Jon's on Dragonstone, so he might head there. But other than that, where does he have to go?
Does he know that Jon's on Dragonstone?
Well, the Maesters were aware of Daenerys being on Dragonstone, so it seemed like they could have that information. I wouldn't be surprised if they did have that information.
The funny thing is, Sam doesn't even know that Jon died and came back to life. All this whole thing has happened, and he doesn't even know about it, and he's going to go back. I mean, the next time we see Sam might be at Winterfell. I feel like that's also a possibility. I think he knows that Jon is the king in the north, right? I think he said that even. My memory of that one is not very clear. But I feel like there's the chance of him going to Dragonstone seems low. Yeah.
It's the complete opposite side of the continent, so whatever, but...
Yeah, so next episode then. Anything else you want to say about Sam?
No, I just think that revelation is huge. I'm excited to see what happens with that. I don't really care about what happened to Sam in this scene, just that.
That's fair. Anyway, so we go back to Dragonstone, and Tyrion and Varys are having a drink in the throne room, which is a nice throwback to the similar scenes that we had in King's Landing from seasons gone by, right? Any scene, we used to say, if any scene with Varys in the throne room was always going to be a good scene, right? Oh, yeah. And I don't know if that's necessarily the case in this one. Varys is concerned with Dany's, burn them alive strategy, right? Understandably so. He voiced that opinion, by saying, listen, I'm for the people, that whole thing a couple weeks ago. So Tyrion tries to justify it all. Kind of goes through the same thing we talked about earlier. And Varys kind of regales us with this, story about how he used to do the same kind of justifications for himself when he was working for the Mad King, right? It's a nice little story. And I don't really like this scene. I can't really put my finger on it, but it just, something feels off.
You really didn't like this episode, eh?
I don't. The more I wrote this, I was writing my my recaps. I found like there was some. I felt like critical story errors, or not even story errors, but just like strange choices by the showrunners and the creators that felt so forced to me. And I think maybe that's kind of what it is that's bothering me in this scene. Here are two aides worried about seeing Dany turn to the dark side, but I can't help but feel like Dany was justified to some degree, and this just feels like drama for drama's sake, because I don't know how much this is going to come back up, later on. Maybe it will. I could be totally wrong, but it just doesn't feel like the right time to be going through this whole thing, because we just talked about it. didn't we just talk about this whole stuff?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
I would say it is kind of weird how Varys has become sort of like a good guy.
Skeptic.
You know, because like even though he was working for other kings and it was their orders, he was pretty ruthless back in the day. Mm-hmm. You know, like it's just weird that all of a sudden, like, he's always said he's for the people, whatever, but all of a sudden
he's a bleeding heart. Like,
exactly.
I don't know.
And because like that thing with Daenerys, like she wasn't doing it for like the Mad King burned people for fun, just to torture people, just to watch. You know, she was doing it. This has a purpose. This makes sense strategically for the army. So you'd feel like Varys would be on board with it.
Well, it's not even that. It's like it's clear that there's a difference, right? It's not clearly they're not the same choices, right? So to get all like, oh, you know, I can't believe she's doing this kind of stuff. It feels so fake, you know. Or a waste of time, or both. And either way, we don't have time for that kind of stuff right now.
Well, no, I mean, it's fine because they're not actually doing anything about it. But like, he's just kind of mentioning that it is a slippery slope. So, you know,
he says that you have to get. At one point in that thing, he says like you have to convince her to listen to you, right? You're talking to Tyrion.
Yeah.
So, and I'm sure I would bet dollars to donuts it's going to come back up. I hope it's dealt with quickly. But if that's the last we hear about that kind of stuff. I'd be okay with that as well.
Yeah.
So we move to a scene, I guess behind the throne room, at the painted table, and Jon has received the same message from Bran, and finds out that not only is Bran alive, but so is Arya, and his reaction is like almost anger. Like it's such a strange reaction here, right? And then he moves off of it and goes right into exposition dumping, like really fast. How did you take that?
I don't know. I get what you mean. He was angry. He's just kind of frustrated because he is stuck all the way down here and he kind of needs to be up in the north. He's been frustrated for a while, right? So that's just what's shining through there. Jon's not the type of character that would be, you know, jumping for joy, giving people high fives around the table if he heard that news, right? So
that's true. So like I said, then Jon goes right back into exposition mode and starts telling Dany about how the Night King is marching on Eastwatch, and it's time for him to go, right? Now, she rightly points out that he made it clear that they didn't have enough men up in the north to even like try this whole thing. But he's like, no, listen, I can't sit around any longer. I have to do something. Either you help me or I have to go, right?
Pretty much.
She tells him that she didn't give him permission to leave, and obviously the subtext here is she doesn't want him to leave, right? And it's not that subtle, right? There's actually a few like longing glances, especially by her this episode.
Yeah, she's fallen in love.
That? You got that? Is that what you're? Did I convince you to come around to my side on this last week, or are you still like kind of like you don't want to see that?
I mean, it's not that I'm against it necessarily. I just think because we've talked about it so much, like it feels like that's predictable now, which is not the case. It's not really fair to the writers or to the show.
No.
But it's just like I'm kind of already like seeing it in my head, so I'm already kind of sick of it, you know?
It seems weird to be sick of it after like only 3 episodes of them being.
No. We've been talking about this for like seasons, for years.
Oh, that's true. I guess as a book reader, this has kind of been like the thing that people have been talking about for a long time. That's fair. It's just one of those things where like you know that you have a pretty good idea that's where the story's heading, and you're just like, let's get there already, kind of deal.
I'm not even in a rush to get there, but it's just this whole like they're trying to do a sort of will they won't they thing with them, and they're like you said, the longing glances, like this is Daenerys changing. It's like I don't find that captivating or intriguing at all.
Okay,
but that's being unfair to the show, which this is something they have to do.
Yeah. So Jon makes a nice speech about trusting a stranger, and then things turn stupid real fast. So Dany can't go with Jon because she says if she abandons her position, she can't. She can't abandon her position to Cersei. So the plan that they hatch here is to capture a white, which is again I'm just going to use the term zombie for the rest of this episode just to make it as clear as possible what we're talking about, right? And bring this zombie back to King's Landing as proof to Cersei that they have bigger fish to fry, right? Now, to do this, Tyrion needs to sneak into King's Landing and talk to Jaime so that they can even get an audience with her, right? Oh, and Jorah is agreeing to go with Jon to help get this white, right? Now, this has got to be the fucking stupidest idea that anyone on the show has ever had since Ned showed up in the throne room with that scrap of paper from his dead friend.
What else are they supposed to do?
Okay, let me put it this way.
Okay, hit me. Sorry.
If I tweeted this out last night, basically, if anyone in that room with Dany thinks that if any of them walk into a meeting in King's Landing with Cersei, that they won't be fucking betrayed and murdered right away, they're a fucking idiot.
Okay.
It's clear as day. Not just to me in the show world. It's clear.
Yeah.
To them it should be clear.
None of them have any reason to trust Cersei or even want her on their side, really.
Yeah, it's a terrible plan. Tyrion's like, if we can't come to the dead, we'll take the dead to her or whatever. Like, no, it's basically this idea is so crazy it just might work kind of thing, right? But it's just so crazy, it's definitely not going to work. There's just no way that this goes smoothly. Even if zombie or not, right? Even if they can somehow get that zombie, which it seems nearly impossible anyway, right?
Yeah, especially because the whole army is there. Like they're ready to the mouth of the dragon.
You're just gonna sneak in and grab one? Like how do you think that's gonna work? Like a giant net, like a giant butterfly net? I don't know. So they're gonna do that and then bring it all the way back down south, right? To have this meeting with Cersei, who is in a position who's losing right now, right? It makes no sense.
I mean, the whole point is that the war that they're fighting in the south doesn't matter, right? So this is the priority. So Dany's going to keep fighting the war with Cersei in the meantime, and Jon's going to do this because what else is he supposed to do? It is a last-ditch effort, but it's their only real option, right?
No, I don't think so. I think that what's the best case scenario here? Assume their plan goes perfectly well.
Yeah.
How does that meeting with Cersei go?
I don't know. I would be inclined to believe, I would be inclined to agree with you that Cersei would just betray and murder them all. However, later on in this episode, she does say that she's kind of more open to, to peace, at least for the time being.
She says she needs to solve this the way Father would, which immediately implied to me.
We need to be smart. So she was thinking, make an agreement, whatever, and then she can betray and murder them later. But this would be the beginning.
It's the red wedding thing all over again.
Sure.
And everyone knows about the Red Wedding and that the Lannisters were involved in that. Why would anyone trust her? No, there's no reason to trust her. There's not a single reason to. And again, this is not just like from our perspective. This is in world. They should know that.
Man, you're real worked up about this.
It's crazy how dumb. It's the worst idea, right? And I remember thinking it at the time, like first time watching the show, I'm like, okay, it's not the best plan. And then I rewatched it. I'm like, no. I was like, no, this is stupid. This is just really dumb. And because there's just so many things that can go wrong. And then even if everything did go right, it still would fall apart at the end. And I think they should know that. So that's what's most frustrating to me. I just, whew. Anyway, do you have any other thoughts on this?
I mean, I don't know. I do agree with you. It's a long shot, but Jon was heading there either way. He got a couple extra guys to go with him, whatever.
So, no, I'll save it. I'm enough rant now. I'll go on another one later. Let's think. We just take a quick break. Okay, let's take a quick break. Gather our thoughts here a little bit. Take a deep breath, and thank some people who donated to our crowdfunding campaign. How's that sound?
Sure.
All right. So we're going to thank 7 people today. And most of them, we don't know where they're from. There's this, like I mentioned a couple weeks ago, that there's this gap right in the middle of our donations where we don't know where people are from. This is that gap. After this, I think we know where everyone's from. So, at the same time, I don't know how much that matters to everyone else, but it matters to me. I kind of like to know where people are from.
It is kind of fun. We have people like in Australia and New Zealand emailing in this week. It was crazy.
Do you think, are they more or less international than the Japanese?
The one dude actually said that. He's like, I'm more into, I beat the guy from Japan because I'm from Australia.
Okay, so let's start. Max Kirouac, friend of the show, friend in real life, in the RL, as they say, from good old Winnipeg, Manitoba. Thanks for the donation, Max.
Thanks, Max.
As always, thanks for listening as well. So, Dan, who's next?
Next is John Rock from Lake in the Hills, Illinois.
First of all, cool name. Last name Rock.
John
Awesome.
Rock. Yeah.
Lake in the Hills is a cool name for any place. It's very distinct, it's distinct and also descriptive. It's self-descriptive. Like, whoa, where is that? You think, is it like, it's in Illinois, but like where specifically? Like by the lake in the hills.
In the hills, yeah. Yeah. Do you have the donations in front of you?
What do you mean? I don't think so.
I wanted you to read his comment, but if you don't have it in front of you, it's fine.
Why?
He
I can bring
just
it up.
said that he likes Dan a lot and he wants to buy us beers if we go to Chicago.
Okay,
but it would have been better if you read it. Now it seems petty.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Do you think he would only buy you a beer, or do you think
That's what it sounded like?
Okay.
Nah, I don't
I'll
know.
remember. Oh, that's all right. I remember. So we can presume that then Lake of the Hills is not far from Chicago.
Cool. Yeah.
Michael Brooks from, I don't know, but Michael Brooks, thank you very much.
Michael Brooks, another cool name. Next is Miles Bieber. Again, these for the rest of them we don't have a location.
Yeah.
But...
So I was gonna make a Brooks like you have a lake and then like a bubbling brook joke. I couldn't. While you were saying his name, I couldn't quite come up with the full joke, so I just want to say that's what I was thinking about doing, and then it didn't do it.
Yeah, 50%. I'm not even gonna. It's not even. You get like a C for effort.
Okay, so here's a question. Before I read this name, do you think this is a hard G or a soft G?
I'm gonna say it's a hard G.
Okay. I'm also gonna think it's a hard G. So Annabelle Berger. But see, then now it sounds like a hamburger, which I'm sure she's heard, and I'm so sorry.
Maybe it's like French berger.
I think it could be, or Berger. I think it's I'm you know what, I take it back. It's Berger. If we ever mispronounce your name, feel free to write into us and tell us how badly we got it. But Annabelle Berger, thank you very much. Dan, who's next?
Christopher Woodruff.
That's an easy one. I mean,
yeah.
Like it's clear that that's how it's.
I know how those words sound.
And this is another, easier to pronounce name, Gregg Williams. So thank you to everybody who's donated. We love talking to you guys in the Slack group. So again, thank you very much.
Yeah.
So let's move on to King's Landing, and Jaime is back to talk to Cersei. He's still all muddy from his trip in the river, and he tells her that after that loss, and having seen the Dothraki and a dragon, that this is not a war that they can win, right? Now, Cersei makes a good counterpoint by telling him that they don't really have a good choice. Like, they're not really in a good position to what's the word I'm looking for here, Dan? Help me out. Help me out. Sure. My mind's going blank.
I don't know what you're trying to say right now.
There's not a good Okay, I'm just gonna move on.
Whatever. There's no alternate strategy.
Yeah. I'm just really upset that I can't remember.
You can't. Nobody can prepare for dragons.
No. Well, they thought they did. They had those sweet scorpions, right? It didn't work though. Even Jaime brings that up. He's like, we had Qyburn's scorpion, didn't even do anything, right?
Well, yeah.
It did still technically do something, to be fair. Although Drogon is like totally fine, this week. People were really concerned like that he wasn't gonna be all right. There are people that were like speculating that you remember how Khal Drogo died. Remember, just a light wound to the arm, a
festering wound.
We thought people were like, oh, maybe this is like it's the same idea, named after the same guy, right? Wound in the arm.
I mean, it could be. But you gotta remember, Drogo was also poisoned. Like, Miriam Azdur poisoned him as she was pretending to heal him, right?
Yes.
I can't remember who said this now, so I'm sorry if I'm not giving someone credit, but somebody was saying Qyburn could have put poison on the spears because he's into that kind of stuff. He brought the mountain back, and he kind of reverse engineered some of those poisons.
Possibly.
But again, I feel like a dragon wouldn't be down by poison. I feel like it would burn through it,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Its blood is too deep. Something along those lines.
Dragons are fire made flesh, yeah.
Mm. And negotiate, Daniel's the word I was looking for, by the way. Negotiate.
Oh, that's a tough one. That's a really tough one.
Yeah, if you've been listening to the show long enough, people know that sometimes my brain just does not allow the word that I want to just come out of my mouth. And this is one of those times. So
it happens to the best of us.
So
stick and move.
Anyway, Jaime, he's kind of in a weird place here. He's like, listen, we can't win this war. Cersei kind of says, like, we have to fight until we can't anymore. Like, that's really our only option, right? And that as a soldier, you should know that, right? It's a pretty good dig. At the same time, though, Jaime drops a truth bomb on her. This is the third one this episode about what really happened to Joffrey. He tells her Olenna had killed him, and then even goes into explaining why it makes sense. Now, if you watch the scene again, Lena Headey puts on a masterful performance here. Just watch her face as Jaime explains why Olenna would have done the whole thing. It's amazing work.
No, yeah, I think we said it a couple times this season. Lena Headey has just been killing it. She's amazing in this scene.
It's insane to me. Like I think there's a lot of great actors on the show. We talked about Theon last week and everything, but Cersei is and Lena Headey is obviously the actress involved here. Just consistently is just bringing like A+, just making other people look bad. Like, and again, we talk about Nicola Castrovaldo being a good actor, but like she just owns that scene with Jaime. Just owns it. I think it's just really great work. Like you can see her face falling as like the dots are connected as he explains why it makes sense that Olenna would have done the whole thing. It's insane. So just go watch that scene again.
Yeah, it's so crazy how like she kind of like makes you care about this character, even though everybody hates Cersei, right? Mm-hmm. But you still feel for her.
I can't speak highly enough about Lena Headey's abilities. I just can't. So the takeaways here. At this point in the episode, I still have hope that Jaime's going to come to his senses. You can see that he's kind of has a realization that this whole war against Dany might not go so well, right? And that there's a chance that he might just start distance himself from Cersei, right?
Yeah.
But alas, those hopes are dashed later on in this episode, in this exact same episode, which is very frustrating. But again, we'll get to that.
Alas,
earwax. My favorite. I feel like I've said it on the show before, but alas, earwax. Yeah. My favorite Harry Potter line. Later, back in the Dragon's Skull Room, Bran cleverly sets up this meeting between Jaime and Tyrion. So you had mentioned earlier that you think that Tyrion had sent a message to Bran ahead of time. They set it up on their Gmail account together. Are you possible that he didn't go find Bran when he arrived in King's Landing? Is that not a possibility?
Tyrion did?
Yeah.
I feel like maybe, but it's kind of hard for Tyrion to move around. He stands out. Everybody knows to look for the Tyrion the Imp,
Yeah,
he's got a distinctive scar on his face. He's shorter than everyone else. Like he's going to get noticed if he's in King's Landing. The only way he could have done it is maybe while he was escaping, he has a favorite route through all those hidden
I think passageways and whatever. Likely. I think that it's not worth thinking about it too much, right? Like we shouldn't really dwell on that.
No, of course, but this is one of the ones. I know you were mad about the one earlier for whatever reason, but this one, I threw my hands up in the air when this happened. Bran doesn't receive his own ravens. It's not like he has a place that they could be sent in the first place. So yeah, you're probably right. Tyrion would have had to figure it out once he got there.
Yeah. What about when Jon arrives at Eastwatch in the same episode he left Dragonstone? That doesn't bother me?
It doesn't bother me anymore.
We got to stop talking about it. We have to stop talking.
Yeah.
We have to, because we bring it up every time. we're not going to talk about it, but then this one, can you believe what they did this time, you know? So Bronn sets up this meeting with Jaime and Tyrion. And again, this is why I am mad about seeing Jaime escape from being captured this week. We could have had way more of this kind of scene. And, you know, we would have been able to make senses after a while. Instead, we get this scene that's way too short. Like, did you feel like they kind of like, it should have been like at least another like 2-3 minutes? Or is it just me?
Not necessarily. Like, it's really nice to see the two brothers again. You know, I love their dynamic, and because they were the closest of the siblings, like the scene is very satisfying to me. Of course, you want more of those two actors together, but
yeah, and that's the thing. I think that these are great. These are two great actors that are great together, especially. And we barely get anything from this scene. Like, it's very short, and you're right, it is satisfying. But I just feel like I would have liked more. And maybe it's just me being greedy, you know. And it's been so long since they've been together on, you know, on screen together, that I would have liked a little bit more than this like short interaction, right?
Yeah, but it's not really, the show's not about fan service.
It's one of the few times this season that I felt like things were rushed. You know, we got that really nice that scene with Arya last week with the guards, and I liked that they were taking their time to do that kind of stuff. Even this scene, or this episode with Davos and the gold cloaks, right? But to get that over more of this is not the mixture that I would have gone with, right? Now, Tyrion basically just says that they're willing to agree to an armistice, but before that, he tries to kind of defend himself and his actions in killing their father, right? And it's kind of sad, but like at the same time, you want to see Tyrion have a little backbone, you know? It almost sounds a little whiny.
I don't know, but like he definitely betrayed Jaime. Like he's coming to him hat in hand here. Jaime let Tyrion out, and Tyrion took that opportunity to kill their father and really sewer Jaime. Yeah, so
that's true.
You know, he's got a reason to be mad.
Nice use of the term "sewered," by the way.
Yeah, I don't often throw that out.
You've been hanging out with with Robbie a lot lately, or what?
Yeah, I've been hanging out with the wrong crowd. Yeah.
So back upstairs, Jaime relays the message to Cersei, who already knew about this whole meeting, right? And I guess she listened to Jaime from the earlier scene in her own way, because she agrees that this armistice is a good idea for them for now, right? Now, she says that they need to resolve this like father would, and like we mentioned earlier, my mind went straight to the Red Wedding, and that any plan that they're going to do here is clearly a trap, and again, it's why the plan is fucking stupid. But
I guess they're just relying on the dead guy to convince Cersei that there's a real threat.
Don't you just get the impression that Cersei would be like, she just doesn't care about that?
Probably.
Right? I mean, that's just call me crazy.
I don't know. I'm surprised that Cersei knew Tyrion was there and didn't move on him in any way. That's crazy to me.
Yeah, that is kind of interesting. Or maybe she found out after the fact and she didn't have time to do anything about it. But her implication is that she knew the whole time.
Yeah, that she allowed it to happen.
And maybe it was an opportunity for her to test Jaime's loyalty.
She doesn't really think that way.
She does, though.
She's pretty vindictive. I think if she knew Tyrion was in the capital, she would have had him arrested and tortured and killed.
I don't know.
Anyways,
that's a good point. I guess for some, I guess to justify it, she either knew after the fact, or like I said, was testing Jaime's loyalty, because she even says like, "Don't betray me again," right? So we get another truth bomb in this scene. Cersei is pregnant, and she's going to tell everyone that Jaime is the baby daddy. This is where this kind of the whole like Jaime redemption arc thing starts to fall apart again. It's really frustrating, right? And so I guess we should mention before we go any further that the flashback at the beginning of, what was it, season 4 or season 5 with Maggie the Frog?
5, I believe.
And this Maggie the Frog had prophesized that that Cersei would only have 3 kids and they would all die, right? There's other parts to it as well, like that she would be replaced by a younger, more beautiful version of her, whatever. So far, all those things have come true, right? Except for the being replaced part. That hasn't happened yet. But she's had 3 kids, and they've all died, right? So there is a chance that her prophecy was wrong if she does, in fact, have another child. More likely, in my mind, we at the same time, we know that prophecies have been known to be false in the past, right?
I don't know. This one doesn't strike me as one that would be, though. I think, honestly, and as morbid as this sounds, what's most likely she's not going to carry the child to term. Either she'll die with it or something bad will happen to the baby inside her.
I get that same impression as well. The way I look at it is, speaking of Jaime's redemption arc, is that he'll probably end up killing her and at the same time killing his own child, which is super dark and, like you said, pretty morbid.
Yeah, that's not really redemptive. Here's the thing about making Cersei is the villain, but giving her a baby, like, you can't kill her off now. I guess they've done it before, but
they did an audience really brutal move with that, with the Red Wedding. I don't think they have that. They can. No, that is not a protection card. Can.
Yes, but as an audience member, you say like you love to hate her or whatever. But we all kind of want Cersei to die. Now you can't do that because there's a little baby.
I suppose, but I just. But at the same, did people even want her to have this kid? Like, I don't think that. I don't even get the impression that that's that the audience would even. Well, she's pregnant. Well, now she has to stay alive because I want her to have this baby. Like, I don't get the impression that people even like her enough for that to be the case. And I'm sure there is people.
It just makes you into a monster if you want the baby to die. Well, that's all I'm saying.
True. Which is why it makes that situation with Jaime that one more complicated, which might be why they're going that route. Now, I feel like some people. This is a touchy subject, right? Now, I feel like some people might think that she's lying to Jaime to keep him under her thumb in some way, that she's not actually pregnant. Now, I considered that in my first viewing for about a half a second and threw that one out really quick, right? Now, the reason being is that there's no reason to believe that she's lying here. There's no subtle hint that she might be, this all might be a ruse. And mostly, there's this whole, because it is such a touchy subject, we have no reason to believe that she's not pregnant. So until we know, otherwise, until the show says otherwise to me, I'm taking it at face value.
Fair enough, yeah.
What do you think about that?
Well, I think people are just kind of grasping at straws because, like you said, it does kind of, it doesn't ruin Jaime's arc, but it definitely changes it, right? So people are kind of looking for an out there.
Yeah, I guess. Go ahead. Sorry.
You're right. I don't see how she really benefits because Jaime's loyalty hasn't really been in question yet
until today.
So, and even then, not really that much.
It's just there's that whole thing. Remember. I don't know if you follow the off-season stuff as much, but the whole deal with Sansa in the off-season, that people thought that maybe she was pregnant with Ramsay's baby. Mm-hmm. It was. Man, that was a huge deal. Like, it was, and I don't want another version of that of is she not situation. She is. I'll just put that out there, guys. She's pregnant. I don't think that should be in question. I really don't. And again, it is a touchy subject, so let's just leave it at that, I think.
Sure.
Now, the scene ends with Cersei warning Jaime not to betray her again. Is that that's just foreshadowing for when he does inevitably betray her, right?
Yeah, we all have our fingers crossed for that, right?
Maybe this whole thing is just not going to go the way we think, right? Is that still on the table?
That's a strong possibility. This show is notoriously hard to predict accurately, so.
Yeah, I guess time will tell, I suppose. It's definitely an opportunity for the show to subvert expectations, right? It's still possible. Just seems at this point it wouldn't be great, but I could, if it's done well, I could still buy it. Does that make sense?
So yeah, as much sense as it could.
So meanwhile, while all this stuff is happening in Flea Bottom, Davos has his own plans, and he walks into this blacksmith shop, and as soon as he walked into the blacksmith shop, did you immediately knew that we were going to see Gendry again?
Yeah, 100%.
So none other than motherfucking Gendry turns around, and he's sporting a nice new haircut and is looking pretty good. Or as my friend messaged me, a stone cold fox. Now, they open with this line from, well, not really open. They drop this line from Davos, like, I thought you'd still be rowing, which is kind of an inside, nod to super fans. The actor who plays Gendry tweeted out last season when people asked him where he was. He tweeted out, all he said was still rowing on Twitter, which is pretty funny.
Hilarious. I love that kind of stuff. They did it a couple times in this episode. It's like the showrunners kind of talking to the audience. You know what I mean? Like it's a little slightly meta joke.
And I'm okay with it as long as they don't overuse that. I like this one a lot though because it's been around. It's been out there for so long.
Yeah.
And then the two of them have a brief and funny exchange. I like when he's like, all right, so listen, with this very dangerous situation, so we're going to get going. Okay, I'm ready to go. I do like that. And it's this scene and the one later on by the boat with the gold cloaks that you can really tell Matt Shackman's like comedy roots are really coming into play. Obviously you weren't thinking about that kind of thing at the time, but
no, not it. But it is good to break it up with that kind of stuff. It keeps it a little bit light, and I don't know. This, like you said, this was a relatively longer episode, but that stuff helps you get
that.
Through,
And
I guess.
I don't think we're going to see a lot of lighthearted anything in the next 2 weeks, so you might as well enjoy it now while it lasts.
It's all downhill from here, yeah.
And so we find out that Gendry is not a swords person, but he made himself a pretty badass hammer. And then the two of them head back to the boat where they get spotted by the gold cloaks. Why is that hammer important, Daniel?
Well, it's what his father used. Robert was supposed to be like incredibly strong in his prime, and obviously Gendry is too. You see him use the hammer later on in the episode. So it's just like another example of like what was it? Amy who had said things coming full circle. Like he's becoming the embodiment of his father.
Cool.
Also, I don't know if you noticed, he put a little gold stag on the hammer, so it's kind of like if you're trying to hide, that's not the way to do it.
Especially if you're just lying around the
yeah.
Well, I mean, he's hiding right under her nose, which I thought was smart.
Yeah.
They get spotted by the gold cloaks. Davos puts on like quite the show as he uses his smuggling powers to pay off the guards and convince them to look the other way. I really liked that. I thought it was a lot of fun. Like the fermented crab, really good. Yeah. Like he sticks it in their mouths too. It's hilarious. And then Tyrion returns at the worst possible moment, right? He's walking down the path. He's he sees them too. It's like he had.
Yeah, you can see that from quite a distance.
And I love what he's he kind of looks. He's like, do I have a chance to hide, or what can I do here? But then instead just walks by, just goes yeah, I'm just gonna nonchalant walk right past them, right? Obviously that doesn't work. And then Gendry gets to show off his hammer swinging skills. Hammer time, if you will, right?
I will.
And he's pretty bad. That hammer is pretty badass, though, right? You don't see hammers used very often in combat situations, I don't feel like. So when you get to see something novel like that, it stands out.
Well, it's crazy. It's like using a sledgehammer. You get any little bit of power in front of it, nobody can stop it. You can't block that, you know?
Well, yeah.
You have to dodge. You can't block. You have to parry.
If you had a strong shield, you could still break your arm, I guess, I suppose, even
Mm-hmm.
So they get off the island scot-free. And they get back to Dragonstone, and Davos takes Gendry to meet Jon. And the whole time they're going over there, he's like, "Listen, your name's Clovis. You can't worry Jon about this whole thing right now. He has too much going on. He's got a lot on his plate." He's like, "Yeah, absolutely, sure thing, absolutely, no problem." Gets to Jon. He's like, "Hi, my name's Gendry." Really funny. That's got to be the standout funny moment of the whole episode. And then Gendry remarks that hey, our fathers used to be friends. Maybe we can be friends, right? It is kind of. But do you get the impression that Jon's kind of just annoyed by this whole situation a little bit? He's like,
Maybe a little bit. It is just out of the blue adding something in, but Jon will take all the help he can get at this point.
I suppose. So here's the thing. I feel like I like Gendry as a character, okay? I just think the show was in a tough spot because no matter what, he's been gone so long that bringing him back in any way that didn't feel like I said earlier, forced or contrived, is going to be difficult. And I think this still does feel that way. It's very convenient, right, that he shows up at this moment, right, so we can go north with him, all that whole thing. But I don't know what the show could have done differently. So even though I do feel like, yeah, this doesn't quite work for me, I kind of can let the show go on this one, because like they had written themselves into a corner, and there's just nothing you can do at that point. Like, I don't know how else you introduce him.
That's kind of how his character's always been, though. It's like out of nowhere. You know, he's hit, like we said earlier, hidden under plain sight. So it doesn't really bother me that much.
I mean, I come off being like a hater in this episode, and I apologize, guys.
I think just this episode. I think usually it's the other way around.
No, it's good to switch spots every once in a while. And so they have that quick conversation. He agrees to join him. All's good. Then it's time for Jon to leave. Jon and Dany say their farewells. She says that she's gotten used to him being around. Again, more longing glances, right? We can all safely assume that this probably isn't the last time they're going to see each other, right? Listen, here's another chance for the show to subvert expectations. But like, if I was a betting man, which I'm not, but if I was, I would place a good portion of my income, which is not a lot, on those two seeing each other again, right? I'm not crazy here. What do you think?
No, of course not. Yeah.
What are the odds? Okay, let's say you want to short this stock, right? What are the odds that they're going to subvert expectation? Jon dies again. Less than 0.
I don't know. I think it's a little late in the series to be doing that kind of stuff.
Less than 1%. We'll hedge our bets. Let's say it's less than 1% that he dies, and they never see each other again after all that groundwork they laid.
Yeah. He might die and get resurrected again.
Didn't he ask specifically not to get resurrected again?
Yeah, he did, but
tell Melisandre though, who's not there.
Thoros is though, and Dondarrion. Excuse me.
Anything else you want to say about Jon and Dany before they go their separate ways for a little while?
I think we've said enough about them this episode.
One last shout out to Jorah, and poor guy, friend zoned again.
I think he's over that.
I don't get that impression. He gives Jon the stink eye like twice this week. You know.
Yeah, but I think he knows his role in Daenerys'
I think it's probably
regime,
part of the reason he decided, like, listen, I'm going to take off. Right? Listen, you need my help, but let me go with Jon here. I know the North, I guess, a little bit, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, he's from Bear Island. He knows North very well.
So, back in Winterfell, Sansa is listening. This show, there's so many more scenes, guys. Well, not that many more, but still, like, it just feels like we've talked about so many distinct scenes already. It's insane. 18. Sansa is listening to the Northern Lords complain about Jon being absent. Arya watches and then gets annoyed at her for not standing up to her, like, for her brother. Right? Arya basically accuses Sansa of power grabbing while Jon is away, and she's kind of right.
I don't know that Sansa was really actively doing that, but there's definitely a lot of tumult among the Northern Lords, which is something we've been predicting for a while.
If she wasn't actively, power grabbing, like I said, then by not trying to keep these guys in their place, like maintain order, it's almost as bad, here's the thing: a lot of people have criticized the show. But like this episode specifically for adding in this inter-sibling drama here. And I agree somewhat that I don't think the show has time for Arya and Sansa to have a rift again. Like, we just don't have time for that. And I don't think it adds much to the show right now.
I don't know. I think it's bound to happen.
Well, if you let me finish.
Oh.
But that being said, as someone who has a less than great relationship with my own sibling, I can also see, I can also buy it. It feels true to life to me at the same time, even if it's like, it sucks to see it because, like, again, we would like to see these guys work together and just work towards a common goal. But unfortunately, I guess we're going to have to see them work through more difficulties before that happens again, or who knows what happens. What do you think this leads? Where do you think this rift leads?
Civil war, man.
Between who?
Between the Stark children.
Like people are going to take sides and there's literally going to be a war?
I don't know if the North will divide. Like it's becoming clear that, you know, they're siding with Sansa because Jon is gone. If we find anything out about Jon's parentage, the North will rally behind Sansa. Bran is the rightful lord, but I don't think he cares. But it's definitely, like you keep saying, this rift, like that's going to be the chaos that Littlefinger loves so much, right? He's kind of, you know, prodding them along into this. Sansa's become too political and too much like Littlefinger and Cersei. Arya doesn't
she's
hold
not
that kind of
she's
stuff,
not at all
right?
like that. She's basically being played like Ned was in season 1, which is a shame. Here's how she follows Littlefinger around, like she like sneaks around. Now, and I don't know if this is the show just like using shorthand, like they don't have time to like show her like in really good hiding spots or something. But both her and Littlefinger are terrible at hiding. They just hide and they're just standing there. They're just like
that's the classic look. Yeah.
It's you remember Grandma's Boy? And there's that line
exactly.
Where
I know
he's like
exactly
standing
what you're
against the
talking about.
wall and he's like, "How did you see me?" Like that's basically what I feel like is happening here. And I think the show is just like, listen, we don't have time for subtlety. So we're just going to be like, yep, she's following him around, whatever.
I guess, but it was a bit much. Like it's like every time it cuts to Arya like standing in the hallway or whatever, it's supposed to be like a dun 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 moment, and then at the end it flips it all around and Littlefinger has one. It's just too much, man.
Bum, 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 bum. It's like, okay, we get it. Like, come on. So she's following around, and then Littlefinger gets this letter that the Maester had gone and found for him. He hides it in his room. Arya sneaks in and finds the letter. Now I had to pause the screen and read it, and not even all of it's in focus, which is even more annoying. So even with a screen grab frozen, it's still not clear what the letter is. But I've done enough kind of like snooping around that I am 95% sure it's the letter that Sansa, because it's clear that it's written by Sansa. That's not under question. That it's the letter that Cersei made Sansa write back in season 1 to convince Jon to Robb to come to King's Landing and bend the knee, right?
Yes. And I'm not sure how that really, like, what is that gonna do?
I don't know. That's what I thought too, because at the time when the first viewing, and I was obviously watching it in some place where I couldn't pause the TV, you know, I thought, because I only saw part of it, and it was like died of wounds something. I was like, I thought it was the letter from Winterfell that Jon had died, right? And I thought that would have been more of a, you know, important thing, you know, that could turn the tides against Jon, right? But
definitely,
I don't see how this, like, what this does. I don't see how it helps Littlefinger. I was hoping you would have the reason.
I know. I've been trying to think about it for a little bit here. I don't really get it, because he clearly wants Arya to find it. But the only thing this does is, it like you said earlier, it helps that rift between Sansa and Arya. She's not going to trust Sansa because this letter looks like Sansa is on the Lannister side, right? So that's the impression Arya's going to get.
Right. I suppose that the only thing that can happen here now is, like you said, Arya now confronts Sansa. Now, the only way this doesn't just get sorted out by Sansa being like, no, that's not what happened, right? By just clearing it up, is that the show makes Arya do something stupid before talking to Sansa, right?
Yeah.
What are the chances the show makes her do something stupid before talking to Sansa?
I mean, probably pretty high. I'm really worried. You know, Bran gave her the dagger. He had that sort of knowing, regretful look. I hope they don't do a thing where she like decides to kill Sansa so quickly or something like that.
That would be so stupid.
It would be a bit much. But again, they're rushing through these things.
How does that help Littlefinger?
I don't know. That's what's confusing. I don't know why Littlefinger wants this. But again, as far as all it is really is that it creates chaos, and like there is a potential that Littlefinger could still be working with Cersei. I really doubt it, but it could still be there.
Yeah.
Like a really, really long con, you know?
And that's the thing with Littlefinger is there's so many things that are going on behind the scenes that, you know, even with this where it's like, hey, look, there's this thing that happened. But even then we're like, well, what the fuck's that mean? You know? So that's what's frustrating. Honestly, guys, I wish we could give you a better answer here, but it's just so unclear. So, hey, if you guys have a theory as to what you think Littlefinger's long game here is, I would love to hear it
or if there's anything else about that letter that we hadn't considered, send it in.
Please. Yeah, towerofbabblepodcast@gmail.com. Anything else you want to mention about what happened in Winterfell this week?
No, I'm going to be thinking about that letter for the rest of the night, though.
So when you watched it, is that what you thought the letter was the first time you watched it? Or did you have to pause it?
Yeah. No, because there are people in the room, so we kind of figured it out. You can see the signature, and you can see that it mentions Joffrey. So
yeah,
but then on my second time too, I did pause it, and it does look like that letter.
But even then, it's like it's still not clear. It's so weird to make that ambiguous, right? Like, and then like only flash it on screen for a couple of seconds. It's a strange move. Anyway, so we go over to Eastwatch, and so even though Jon found out that his two siblings are still alive, he goes straight to Eastwatch instead of going back to Winterfell first. You know, and why? Because it creates more drama, and that's the only reason why.
No, it makes sense because Eastwatch is on the eastern side of the continent, and they were sailing from Dragonstone.
That's why that happened?
I would have agreed with you if he had gone to Castle Black or anywhere else, anywhere that would take the King's Road, because the King's Road runs through Winterfell. But because they were traveling by sea, and because he has, you know, priorities up there, it does make sense for him to not stop in Winterfell.
It doesn't really to me because he has this important mission he's going on, and he's going with 7 dudes. And he didn't even know that those other guys were there. So he had less than that to go on this important mission.
But this is like it's a sneak attack.
So you don't think that he would want to go to Winterfell, maybe gather some of his best men?
Well, I would say you'd want to bring as many people as you could to Eastwatch, because you know that's where the battle's going to be. Whether or not you're able to kidnap one of these
whites. So I don't understand the idea of going straight there. The thing is,
the other thing is they can't land anywhere like from Dragonstone because King's Landing is right there. They would have to go around to the north, maybe Gulltown or something like that, White Harbor. But it's kind of easier for him to just go straight up to the wall.
I don't really buy it. And the thing is, though, if he had gone back to Winterfell, everything with Sansa and Arya resolved, right? This whole thing with the Northern Lords being, you know, unhappy, resolved, right? It does allow for that kind of stuff to play out on its own. But I don't really like any of those storylines, so I would have liked them to have resolved that anyway. But here he is, and Jon meets up with Tormund again. And I love Tormund because he calls out the plan for what it is. He as just being dumb, right? He's like, I thought you're supposed to convince him to not do these stupid plans. Love that line. They go to the dungeon where we find out that the Hound, Beric Dondarrion, and Thoros of Myr are being kept there. Now, this part of the episode is really fun, specifically because every character has a connection to another one in some interesting and kind of long lost way, right? I guess. Should we go through every connection here?
We don't maybe need to hit all of them. It's interesting to see Jorah back in Westeros. We didn't really comment on that, but he's been gone for so long, right? So him and Thoros of Myr have that connection. Not only were they attorneys together, but during Balon Greyjoy's the Greyjoy Rebellion, they were the first people through at Pike, side by side. This is a cool little nugget.
So they have a history, which is cool, which we didn't know before, but that is awesome. Obviously, the Hound doesn't really have much of a connection to anyone other than the fact that he's hung out with Arya and Jon saw him once, I guess is the connection there.
But he's also kind of notorious. Everybody knows who the Hound is.
Obviously, we have Gendry, who's skeptical of the red priests, right? We have Jorah again with with Tormund, right? We have.
He recognizes the last name. I like that.
It
Actually,
is a nice touch. It's good to acknowledge because it's such a distinct name, right? Thing is, though, Jorah seems to not really care about that stuff. Like he doesn't really dwell on it. He doesn't really mention it much. Even when Sam says he was, he served with his father and all that kind of stuff. Like he never really acknowledges it. Even here, he doesn't really acknowledge it. All he says was, "I heard you did the same thing back the other way." That's it, right? We've gone over that, what Jorah's history was and how he got exiled and all that kind of stuff. By the way, people have wondered, and people I saw asking on Twitter, how is he just like back in Westeros after being exiled? He was in like the back in Oldtown even, right? At the Citadel. How does that work?
What are you talking about? He went to Dragonstone.
No, I know. But so Jorah was exiled from Westeros by his family, right? And then just came back and went right to the Citadel. Is that not like? Was it just like a self-imposed exile, or what's the deal with that?
He was actually sentenced to death. He wasn't exiled. He chose to flee rather than be killed by Ned Stark.
Okay, so he would presumably still have like a death warrant for him out there for him.
I mean, technically, yes. I suppose like, he wouldn't go home because of that, right? Because of the crimes he's committed. Like, he's been pretty vocal about the fact that he dishonored his house. He's aware of it, so that's probably why he isn't really commenting all this stuff as much. Like, he doesn't see himself as a member of that family as much anymore.
I mean, we had talked about how I would have liked to have seen Jorah comment on Longclaw.
I know. I was waiting for that the whole episode.
I just don't think it's going to happen. We didn't get it this week, and I don't think it's going to happen. I would be very surprised. I mean, maybe next week when he like pulls it out.
It would have to be next week. Maybe they're making camp and making conversation.
We'll see. But
it would also be cool to have him meet the new Lady Mormont, his little like niece.
Yeah, it would you.
But that's more fancy.
And also that whole thing, like you said, about not really able to go home, that kind of deal, right?
Yeah, but I just think it would be cool to have her ream him out a bit. Yeah.
Well, anytime Lady Mormont's on screen, I'm happy, right? He speaks harshly, but truthfully. I love that line. Anyway, so they all team up, and here's the question for you: does it really make sense that they all team up? Like this whole, I know that Beric kind of has this like speech about like, here we are all together, going the same direction.
The end of the world.
Like, not for different reasons, but like, let's all go, let's just do it, right? Or whatever. Like, do you buy that whole thing? It kind of feels a little, again, convenient, but it allows this team to exist, so I'm kind of okay with it.
Yeah, well, this team is that's awesome to see them all together. It's super cool. The thing with Thoros and Beric, the Hound to a lesser degree, but I guess he's starting to have vision, so he's starting to see this. Like, it's, again, that fate thing. This feels like serendipity, like they're meant to be here, so it makes sense from their end. And then from Jon's end, he'll take all the help he can get, I guess, but not bring his whole army up.
Did they bring Gendry back just so he could join this team? That's where I kind of come down on it. It seems like Gendry's here just to kind of stir the pot a little bit, to create some tension between some of the members of the team. Because without him there's very little, there's not that much tension, right?
Yeah. Between the Brotherhood and Jon's crew.
Do you think, is that his purpose in this team? That's kind of where I come down on it.
I mean, I don't know if it's his purpose, but it's definitely his function right now. I don't know. We said earlier, I don't know if Gendry's going to survive this encounter in the north. So it could be his only purpose.
That's why I don't think he's going to die, because it would be weird to bring him back just to kill him the next episode, right? Or the episode after that. That seems strange to me, but we'll see. I called it kind of like a dirty dozen, right? Except there's only seven of them. It doesn't quite work the same. I can't think of like a good...
The Magnificent Seven, obviously.
Sure, whatever. I mean, what the Hateful Eight... It doesn't ring off. It doesn't ring the same. It doesn't. You need something else. Magnificent. No, I don't like it. I get it that it exists as a thing, but I don't like it. Either way, it's a. I think someone messaged like they were hoping to hear some like Ocean's 11 team up music playing during that scene, but we get a pretty cool scene of them walking out to close off the episode, of them walking out into the snow. Now, it wouldn't be an episode of our breakdowns if I didn't use the word toque at least once. So I'm going to bring it up here because it's something that's been bothering me for a long time. And if I'm going to be nitpicking all episode, I might as well do one last one. All right. No one on the show ever wears ear protection, like ear warming, anything, right? And if anyone who's lived in a cold climate knows, the first thing that gets cold are your fingers and your ears. And your nose too, but mostly your ears and fingers. Everyone wears gloves, but no one. It's snowing, blizzard, just exposed ears. They would just fall off.
Yeah, they definitely would. But I mean, it's the same reason every superhero gets their mask ripped off. You know, you got to see the actor's face.
I'm not asking to wear a balaclava or whatever strange word that people have for balaclava around the world.
in the South, we have a lot of fans in the Southern States, by the way. It's like that use a toboggan instead of
so
toque.
I would just wish I can't, because I just picture a sled on top of their head. But I can't wrap my head around that. Like, there's got to be some kind of like headband type thing that they could wear, of like a fur headband thing, right? That could work.
I don't know. You got to let that kind of stuff go.
I know.
Realistically, they should all be wearing helmets all the time anyways, right?
For whatever reason, I can be like, I can buy that because the helmets look stupid in the show, right?
Yeah.
They have like the weird like pointy penis head ones and like all bunch of different.
There's a few different styles.
Although, you know who has a cool helmet? If we're talking headwear.
The Hound? I guess he lost it though.
But also, I think that the Lannister army has a pretty decent. They have like a decent looking helmet.
Yeah. Also, Gendry, I guess he lost his too, but he had that cool bull helmet.
He's like, yeah. Oh wait, that one. Oh wait, no, that one doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, that's my final thought on that scene. Anything else you want to say about this team up?
I love it. I don't care how contrived you think it is. It's like the Avengers. I love it.
Yeah, people have made those Avengers comparisons before. That didn't occur to me for whatever reason. I don't know.
It kind of makes sense. And also that that part you were talking about earlier where Davos goes to get Gendry from the blacksmith for the first time. That's when the Falcon says, "I know a guy," and he goes to get Ant-Man.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, good point. Yeah. See, all right.
It all comes together.
I like it now. I just like that idea, not necessarily the whole thing. Anyway, final thoughts. Let's wrap up. Now, my favorite scene was the Jon, Drogon, and Dany meetup early on in the episode. For me, again, it's pretty clear I didn't really enjoy this episode that much. There wasn't a lot to pick from for me this time, so I kind of picked that one. I liked that. I thought the effects were good. I thought the acting was good. I liked some of the foreshadowing they were doing. That's my pick for favorite scene. What was your favorite scene?
Yeah. I mean, as much as I was kind of upset about the instant messaging, whatever app they're using, I did like seeing Jaime and Tyrion back together.
That would have been my other pick as well. If I wasn't so short, I would have picked that one.
Yeah.
Now,
either way, though, this episode was it was a lot of setup. That's why it feels off. It wasn't a bad episode necessarily. The pacing was weird, but it was really just setting things up, putting things in place for whatever happens next week.
That's absolutely right. It's that scene before. It's like episode 8 in most seasons, right? Where you'd have the big episode 9, and then the 10 would be the fallout. This is kind of that same idea, just a couple episodes early, right? Like I said, I didn't really like this episode. Much of what happened and the drama felt forced, contrived. I'm going to use those two words feel appropriate to me for much of what is happening here. They're setting it up, this drama, but if it doesn't feel earned, it doesn't quite work. Even if we'll get to see some exciting stuff later. I think characters made some dumb decisions. I made that pretty clear. None of which has gotten anyone killed yet, right? No fan favorites killed yet, anyway. But
you can pretty much guarantee that it will.
And that's where kind of and at that point, I'm going to even be more annoyed, right? And it's also the first time this season that I felt like they were rushing things in a few scenes. I didn't feel that way up until now, even though I've heard that sentiment expressed all over the internet. This is the first time that I felt that in any significant way. There was a lot of scenes here, like I said, about 20 or maybe a little bit more. It did feel longer, the episode, like we talked about in the last. It's like every time we'd be like, oh my god, I can't believe there isn't more, right? I didn't feel that way with this one. I was expecting it to end earlier than it did, right, and just kept going. And I thought when I was going to check my phone at the end of the episode, it was going to be at like 1:20 or like 1:15, at like an extra 15 minutes. No, it was exactly an hour, and so the pacing was off, like you mentioned as well. So that's kind of my final thoughts on the episode as well. All right, anything else you'd like to say about the episode before we wrap up?
Just that Rhaegar Lyanna marriage thing is huge. I can't get over that.
Also that and the letter and why that's important.
Yeah. I was so excited when that happened.
Okay, guys, we can wrap it up there. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at Tower Babblecast. Like us on Facebook, facebook.com/TowerBabblecast. Head over to our website, towerbabble.ca/donate to leave us a little bit of cash to help reach us our goal this year. Or if you want to help us in another way, leave us a review on iTunes, and you can get entered to win one of the Read Pop George R. R. Martin Game of Thrones merch boxes that has awesome stuff like that gilded issue of Game of Thrones, as well as the T-shirt we talked about, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff. We're going to talk about a few more of those things next week. And that's readpop.com. Again, go to their store, and when you buy one, use the promo code BabbleBox, BABBLEBOX, and that'll get you 10% off at their store. Okay, and that also helps us out. So that's about it. Dan, have I forgotten anything, or I got everything?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, then we will be back next week with Season 7, Episode 6, as yet untitled. It doesn't have a name yet.
And that's clearly
the only
ominous.
time they've done this in the past. They've held off revealing the name, the title episodes until like the week before on large episodes where they didn't want to give anything away. And you can expect big stuff to happen next week. Like things are gonna start really coming to a head for this season. We're probably gonna get a little bit of in episode 7 probably we're gonna get a little bit of fallout and regathering a little bit, probably not as much as we're used to in some of the older seasons, but we're gonna get a little bit of that probably in episode 7. But look for this next week to be a lot like the episode 9s of previous seasons.
Yeah, a lot of big stuff. And that means we'll probably have a little bit more energy talking about it.
Well, I don't think that we didn't have energy. I was just a little disappointed by this week's episode. That's all. And guys, I just want to make it clear. I still love the show. I just didn't like this episode. I'm not going to apologize for what I thought was a less than superb episode of TV. All right. We will talk to you guys next week. This week's Game of Thrones theme is a violin and loop pedal cover by Joel Granger, and you can find their work on YouTube.